Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I've got some pretty exciting news today. The latest expansion has been announced. It's coming out on April the 9th and it's called Rise of Shadows. So we haven't got very long to wait. And this expansion kind of focuses on 5 villains which have made the League of E.V.I.L. That's a terrible name, but I love it. And what's interesting about this year is that all of the expansions are going to be connected. So it looks like we're going to be following the story of the League of E.V.I.L. throughout this whole year of expansion. So it focuses around Archvillain Rafaam, who we've seen before in the game. He's the leader of the League of E.V.I.L. You've also got Dr. Boom, Hagar the Witch, Madame Lazul, and also King Togwaggle. So lots of kind of cool things. I already like the theme of the expansion. There's a bunch of new cards been announced, so I'll get into talking about those soon, and also some details of the expansion. But I'm pretty excited about this, and mostly because I've become very tired of the game. I've talked about it a lot recently, and I should apologise to you guys. I haven't been uploading many sort of ladder videos, but I've been doing a lot of single player, and it's just because I don't really have the motivation to play the ladder right now. And so I apologise for that, but I'm really excited for this because there's going to be some big change. Not only is it a new expansion, which is always more exciting, but this time around we're going to be losing 3 expansions. So we're going to be losing Knights of the Frozen Throne, Journey to Unguru, and Cobbles and Catacombs, because they're rotating out of standard. You can still use them in wild, but that's going to be really cool because the whole game will change. So many powerful cards are going out, so not only will it give Rise of Shadows a chance to shine, so we'll actually get to play those cards, but also Rastakan's Rumble and Boomsday Project. Those 2 expansions were really interesting, but a lot of the cards were too weak to play. So now when the stronger expansions rotate out, we're kind of getting 3 expansions in one, because we'll be able to explore Rastakan and Boomsday as well. So I'm really excited. So let's get in and have a look at some of the cards. So there has been some new mechanics also introduced into the game, but I'll talk about them as the cards come up, which kind of demonstrate those mechanics. So let's start with the first card, which is a legendary Warlock card called Archvillain Rafaam. 7 mana, 7 attack, 8 health. It has Taunt, and the battle cry is replace your hand and deck with legendary minions. So this is a really kind of interesting one. Not necessarily always good, but in certain instances can be pretty cool. It is restricted just to Warlock, so I think most cases where you're going to use this is in like a zoo deck, where the zoo deck puts on a lot of kind of power in the early game, and let's say you're playing against a control deck. Once it gets to turn 7, 8 or 9, that's when the control deck starts to come into the game. Well, at that point, when you're got loads of low cost cards in your hand as a zoo deck, you could potentially play Rafaam, change all your deck and your minions in your hand into legendary ones, and then you've got some potentially big, powerful cards to play and kind of take you through that late part of the game. So that's a pretty interesting way to use it. It also transforms all your cards in your deck, so if there's any sort of deck trashing mechanics, you could use that. So one, it's a way to get rid of the bloods in your deck, so if your opponent's playing Hagar, then you could get rid of them, or if you're playing Hagar, you could also get rid of the bloods that way. So I'm definitely looking forward to trying that in Warlock. And it kind of works in Warlock too because of their hero power. Being able to tap and then draw a legendary minion, that's going to be really strong for that class. So it's pretty good. What I'm a little bit worried about here is that I'm not too keen on decks being able to transform and shift gears later on in the game. So a lot of the time when you've got an aggressive deck, the trade-off is that if the game goes longer than turn 10, you're going to be struggling a little bit and your opponent might have a chance. Cards like this give you a chance to come back into the game and can feel pretty bad to play against if you're playing a control deck, especially as the legendaries are random, so they could just get something crazy and win the game that way. It's kind of like Rexxar in Hunter. I mean, Rexxar's much better than this card, don't get me wrong. I don't think this is going to be as powerful because of the downsides to it, but it was kind of annoying with Hunters where if you ride the wave of Hunter in the early game and you manage to stay in it, and then they just say, okay, that didn't work, I'll play Rexxar and beat you now with Rexxar. So those kind of things don't really work. But I think Archvillain Rafaam is kind of, the power level's low enough, it's random enough that I think it can be quite a cool card to play. So next up, there's Forbidden Words. This is for Priest, and it's a spell that costs 0 mana, but it spends all of your mana and destroys a minion with that much attack or less. So effectively what it means is if your opponent's got a big minion that's got 8 attack, you have to spend 8 mana to kill that minion. So that's okay if you were to do it that way, but it's a pretty efficient way to get rid of smaller minions which may have a lower attack. So some very expensive minions that your opponent could play do have a low attack and high health. Something such as Malygos, for example, only has 4 attack. So you'd only have to spend 4 mana to kill Malygos. So that would be a good way to use it. So it's a pretty interesting spell, one that's very flexible. You can use it at any time in the game pretty much to kill one of your opponent's minions. Maybe turn 1 and turn 2 it's not something you would use, but let's just say on turn 3 or turn 4 there's some stronger minions that your opponents put out. You can just kill them with this, and it's a good way for priests to have some single target removal. Whether you're going to put it in your deck, I don't know, but don't forget that the power level of the whole game is going to be coming down a lot with the 3 expansions rotating out. So this could be one that's pretty popular for Priest. Next up is Hagar the Scheme, and now this demonstrates one of the new mechanics, which is actually schemes for these evil leaders. And this is a Shaman spell that costs 5 mana, and what Scheme does is when the card's in your hand, every turn it's in your hand, it will increase in power level. So for example, this card, when you draw it, it's 5 mana to do 1 damage to all minions. So that is terrible. But if you hold it in your hand for 1 turn, then it does 2 damage to all minions. And so the longer you hold it, the better it is. So to be honest, once you've held this in your hand for 2 turns and it's 5 mana, deal 3 damage to all minions, that's okay. That's kind of a level where it'll be good. Dealing 1 and 2 damage to all minions in certain situations can be really good, but you really want a 5 mana card to do 3 damage to all minions, and then that's pretty decent. But you can hold it for longer, and of course then you could get some huge board clears. So it's a really kind of interesting mechanic. Again, I think if you were to put this in the game right now, I just don't think it is strong enough. I think it's too slow. Shaman is losing Volcano, for example, so this could be a good replacement for that. And it kind of gives you these decisions in your mind. Do you play it this turn, or do you wait for a little bit longer to try and make it a little bit more powerful? And I imagine this will be affected by spell damage too. So spell damage totems are pretty good as well. And also note that it can damage your own minions, just like Volcano can. So pretty cool card. I think that's a really good one for Shaman. I'm quite interested to see what other schemes go into other classes and kind of what they'll be able to do. But it's quite interesting anyway. Next up, we've got the Forest Aid for Druid. Now, this introduces another new mechanic called Twin Spell, which is pretty interesting. So the spell itself costs 8 mana, and it summons 5 2/2 Treants when you play it. Now, we've seen some other Treant synergy cards introduced into the game, so this could kind of lead Druid down that. Druid's going to be hugely affected by the rotations. They're losing a lot of big cards. So this could be a new archetype that kind of comes out of it. And the Forest Aid costs 8 mana to summon 10/10 worth of stats. So on the face of it, it's not very good, especially in the game today with the expansions available now. This is very kind of weak to pay for 8 mana. But the interesting thing about Twin Spell is that once you play it, you don't lose the card. It stays in your hand and you can play it for a second time. So Twin Spells, you can play exactly the same card again. So it's almost like card draw, kind of, but you're drawing exactly the same card again. So what the example they gave in the video here is, you play Forest Aid, your opponent uses a big AoE to kill them, and then you've still got Forest Aids in your hand again to play it the next turn, so you can summon more Treants. And of course, Treants dying does synergize with the Mulch Muncher, which is the rush card that's already been announced. But what's really kind of interesting with this is the Tree Speaker, which is a card which changes your Treants into 5/5 minions. So if you play Forest Aid and your opponent has an answer, you play it again. If they don't have an answer, you can then play your Tree Speaker, and then you've got a bunch of 5/5s on the board. So it's a pretty good way to be able to kind of draw out your opponent's AoE, and it will kind of be a challenge. You can put 2 of these in your deck, of course, so that kind of means you can eventually, over the course of the game, you can play this spell 4 times. So it's going to be quite a challenge. If you're playing a deck that doesn't have minions on the board, you're going to need a lot of AoE to deal with this. You're not going to need any big AoE to deal with the 2/2s, but just the fact that they can play 4 of them over the course of the game and other ways to summon Treants, it might be a bit of a challenge. So that's pretty interesting, and it would be quite cool to see how Twin Spell interacts into other classes. And then moving on, we've got a neutral legendary. This one's called Chef Nomi, 7 mana 6/6, and it has the battle cry of, if your deck is empty, summon 6/6 Grease Fire Elementals. So basically fill your board with 6/6 elementals. Now, this card's pretty bad. unless you play it in a specific situation. So if you're just playing a normal deck and you put this in there, you're not gonna. It's not good because 80, probably 90% of the time, you're not going to be able to play it. But unless they release some kind of interesting cards around this sort of having no deck mechanic, I'm not sure Chef Nomi will see much play at the moment. There's still so many cards to be introduced, so maybe we'll see some synergies. But one area where you could play it with today, you could just play Myra's Unstable Element with this. Put it in a rogue deck, play Myra's Unstable Element, hope that you get Chef Nomi in the draw, and if you do, then when you play it, you can fill your board with 6/6s, which is pretty impressive. Now, there's obviously downsides in a deck like that that's playing Myra's Unstable Element. You don't want to be drawing a 7-mana 6/6 on turn 1 or 2. So it's just a way maybe that could work. Void Contract is another card potentially it could work in. That's the card for Warlock that destroys half of your deck and your opponent's deck, so it gets your deck down to 0 quicker. But it's a risky effect because, yes, it's very powerful, but if your opponent can just clear it, then you know, it's a bit of a waste. But we'll see. Pretty interesting. I'm keen to see it work. It's not the sort of card you can just put into a normal deck, though. So next up, we've got a pretty interesting Mage Dragon. This is a legendary as well. Costs 10 mana, 4 attack, 12 health, so just like a lot of the other dragons. And it's the first spell. It has the effect of your first spell each turn costs 0. This can be really cool. There's loads of cool ways you could use this, but it also has the battle cry of Discover a spell. So, you know, when you spend 10 mana, it's going to take up your whole turn, but you are guaranteed to have one spell that you can play. So, and it's discovered, so you get a choice of 3. So the example they used was he discovered a Flame Strike and then played it. But it's interesting to note you don't have to play the spell that you discover, so you can kind of design your deck around this. So one thing that instantly springs to mind for me is Luna's Pocket Galaxy, a really expensive spell, good effect, but just very difficult to play. You just can't play it. Well, this allows you to play it because you can just play Calico's for 10 mana and Luna's Pocket Galaxy. Now, it's still quite a weak turn that turn you play it because all you're doing is paying 10 mana on that turn for a 4/12 card. But for the rest of the game, your minions will cost 1. So that's quite cool sort of implication you could use it. But any high cost spells can do that. And interesting to note as well is that the battle cries discover a spell, but the effect is constant. So if you did cheat this out somehow, you cheat it out of your deck onto the board, then the effect still counts. So really cool card. I quite like this one. Hopefully there won't be any like seriously annoying combos to be able to do with this, but something like Luna's Pocket Galaxy is going to be really fun, so that's something cool that I want to try. Next up is a Spellwood Jeweler. This is a 3 mana 3/4, so pretty good stats for a 3 mana card. And the battle cry is your hero can't be targeted by spells or hero powers until your next turn. So it's kind of like Timeout in Paladin, except for Timeout, minions couldn't do damage to you. In this case, if your opponent's got minions, they can still do damage to you. But this is a cool one, and I really wish this was printed in Rastakhan because it's very good to kind of combat OTK decks. So if you play this and somebody's trying to do the Mind Blast OTK in Priest or something, they can't do it because your hero can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, and because it's rare you could put 2 in here, so that potentially gives you 2 more turns to kind of handle the game. It's a good tech card, and what I like about this one too is that you can put it in your deck pretty safely because of the stats on it. There's not too many downsides to it, so if you're facing a lot of OTK decks, you can put it in, and then in those games where you don't play OTK, it's still not too bad. It's a 3 mana 3/4. A nice card. I just wish it had been a bit earlier, but something that's quite cool because we didn't have too many ways to deal with OTK decks at the moment, so that's quite nice. Then finally we have the Evil Miscreant, which also showcases a new mechanic in the game. It's a 3 mana, 1 attack, 5 health minion, and it has the combo of add 2 random lackeys to your hand. Now, lackeys are going to be these always 1/1 minions. I'll put them on the screen so you can see them. I won't go through all of them. But basically, you get 2 random lackeys to your hand that you can use, and they have effects like they're a 1/1 minion with a battle cry, deal 2 damage, or give a minion +1 attack and rush. or summon a random 2-cost minion. So these are all kind of interesting effects on a weak body. Things that go quite well into Rogue because they can because they're only 1-mana cards, they can activate combo cards. So they're good combo activators in themselves, and they do other effects. So this is quite interesting. I like card generation cards. It's fun to have these kind of things. They've also said that lackeys will change throughout the expansions. Well, they said they'll be adding more lackeys. I don't know whether these ones will change or whether they'll just add to the pool of lackeys, or they'll take out lackeys and put new ones in. I'm not sure, but that's quite interesting that they will change. The problem with these kind of things is that they're random. So when you only get 2, you don't know which ones you're going to get. So you can't plan for them, but it's quite a fun way to kind of adapt your playstyle to play with them. So the stats on this card aren't that great, but the fact that it's got 5 health kind of means that it might stick around. So that's not too bad if you can use your lackeys to buff it, or there's other ways to give minions attack in Rogue. Crazed Chemist, for example, is a card that isn't really played at all, but that's the card that has combo, give a minion +4 attack. Put that on this, then suddenly you've got quite a good card there. So pretty interesting. I wanted to see what other classes they're going to put these lackeys into. But you know, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of variety, so when you're playing against it, you're going to have to play around the different lackeys. You're going to have to learn what the lackeys are, so that's quite interesting. And I really want to kind of find out how they're going to change. So that's all the cards. I'm really excited to see some new ones as they come out, so I will be covering them. I'm always excited to see new cards, so this is going to be really fun. But like I said, the expansion comes out on April the 9th, so we've still got a bit of time to wait. They have announced the bundles, so let's go through the bundles that you can pre-order if you want to. The first one is $79.99 in US dollars. You get 80 packs for that, so at current prices, that's a pretty good deal. You also get Madame Lazul, the new priest hero. So again, a hero skin priest, that's pretty nice. You'll also get a guaranteed golden legendary, and also the card pack. If you're interested in that kind of thing. So honestly, that's a pretty good deal. If you've got $80 to spend, it's a lot of money, but 80 packs will get you a decent amount of cards and also a golden legendary, so that's pretty decent. The other bundle they're offering costs $49.99, and in that you get 50 packs, so it's the same value on the packs, just a bit cheaper. And the only downsides are here: you don't get Madame Lazul. You also don't get a golden legendary, but you get a standard legendary guaranteed. So that's pretty good as well. Not bad for pre-order bundles compared to some of the others that we've seen. So those are some pretty interesting things. They've also announced throughout the first week of the expansion there will be a $9.99 bundle in dollars. That gives you 9 packs and also a free arena ticket. So that's a good way to top up if you feel like doing it. But there were a few other interesting things that they also announced. On April the 5th, so before the expansion actually comes out, if you log in, you will be getting a free legendary. Everyone who logs in will be getting a free legendary of the new expansion, which you can play in play mode already. So before the expansion even comes out, we're going to be getting a legendary card that we can play in play mode. That's pretty cool. They did this once before with Marin the Fox. They just put Marin the Fox into the meta before the expansion came out that year. So it's pretty interesting that we'll be able to get a free legendary if we log in from April the 5th, so make sure you do that. Also, they've announced that the single player content, I talked about that before, it's going to be bigger and more fleshed out. You're going to get the first chapter for free, but that doesn't come out till May. So that will be a few weeks after the expansion that comes out. They haven't announced the exact date for that, but I'm looking forward to that. That's the expansion that's going to be first chapter free, $20 for if you want to buy all 5 chapters, or 700 gold to buy the subsequent chapters. So, you know, positives and negatives to making that expensive, but personally, if they make a good single player mode, I will pay for it. Especially $20 if I'm going to get a decent amount of playtime that's fun and it's replayable, then for me it's fine. Everyone's different, but I'm quite happy to see that. So guys, right, new expansion. I'm really excited. I really need it. I think the game needs this. It's really Blizzard's opportunity now to reset the game and try and build it again and make it fun. Some of the cards that they released, particularly the Death Knights, I mean, we've talked about this before, were so much fun and so interesting, but they just became oppressive over time. So hopefully they've learned their lesson, and during the Year of the Dragon we can have some fun meta back in Hearthstone, and actually when new expansions come out, make them more relevant than they have been in the past. So I'm very optimistic. I'm really excited. I hope you guys are too. Let me know in the comments what you think about the announcements. Do you think it's interesting? What about the new cards? But thank you for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.